Have you ever wondered what an Amish woman has already cooked, packed, served, and begun preparing again before most Americans have turned off their first alarm in a kitchen with no microwave, no electric stove, no refrigerator hum, and no convenience food of any kind? The 4 a.m. start. The Amish day begins at 4 in the morning, not as a personal discipline choice, but as a practical requirement imposed by the farm's schedule. The dairy cows must be milked before sunrise. The horses must be fed before they go to the field. The children must eat before they leave for the schoolhouse. The farm workers must be fed before they begin physical labor that will run until noon. None of these things can wait for a later start. The woman who manages this kitchen must be at the stove before anyone else is awake, because the food that everyone else requires takes time to produce, and on a wood stove, without electricity, without processed shortcuts, that time is measured in hours rather than minutes. Meal 1: pre-barn breakfast. The first meal produced before sunrise is for the farmer, the husband, who will spend the next 2 hours in the barn before the household sits down to its communal breakfast. He rises at 4 or 4:30. The work he is about to do, milking cows, feeding horses, cleaning stalls, is sustained physical labor in cold conditions that requires fuel. The meal is not a light snack. It is a cooked meal: oatmeal, fried potatoes with eggs, or scrapple and bread produced on the wood stove in the dark before the rest of the household is awake. It is eaten quickly, in relative silence, before the farmer goes out the back door. Meal 2: packed lunches. The second food production task begins while the farmer is in the barn. The school-aged children there, may be 4, 6, 8 of them, need packed lunches for the one-room schoolhouse. These are not assembled from packaged food. A typical Amish school lunch is built from what the household has: a sandwich made from bread baked on Friday, a piece of fruit, a jar of soup canned in August and warmed on the schoolhouse stove by midday, or a foil-wrapped potato from last night's supper. The woman packing 5 or 6 of these simultaneously before the children come downstairs does so from memory. She knows what each child will eat and what will still be good after 3 hours without refrigeration. Meal 3: family breakfast. The full family breakfast is the third food production event of the Amish morning, served at approximately 6 o'clock, when the farmer returns from the barn and the children are dressed and ready for school. This is not a quick meal. It is a cooked, full-course breakfast that an Amish woman described as a hearty, full-course meal served every morning without exception. The table holds scrambled eggs gathered fresh from the henhouse that morning or from the previous evening's collection, alongside fried potatoes, bacon or sausage or scrapple, homemade bread, and oatmeal. On guest mornings or special occasions, the spread expands further: breakfast casseroles, pancakes, cinnamon rolls, choufle pie, baked oatmeal. On ordinary weekday mornings, it is simpler but still cooked and still substantial. The family gathers. The father sits at the head of the table. The food is passed. In many households, a morning devotional follows a brief prayer or scripture reading before the children leave for school and the husband returns to the farm. The breakfast table is the one moment before the day fully separates the household into its different directions, and the meal that anchors it was produced from raw ingredients in a kitchen that has been running since before 4 in the morning. Meal 4: field snack. During the heavy work seasons, planting in spring, haying in summer, harvest in autumn, a fourth food item is prepared for the farm workers who cannot leave the field for a full meal, but who need to eat during the mid-morning hours when the work is most physically demanding. This is not always a formal meal in the sense that the others are. It is a carried item: bread and butter, cold meat, a jar of something preserved, a container of coffee or cold water brought to wherever the workers are and consumed without stopping the work for more than a few minutes. On farms where older children and teenage boys are working alongside the father, the mid-morning field snack sustains a crew of 3 or 4 people through the hours between the 6 o'clock breakfast and the 11 o'clock noon meal. The preparation of this item falls to the woman who has already produced 2 cooked meals and a round of packed lunches before the sun is fully up. It is the smallest of the 5 morning food productions in terms of complexity, but not in terms of importance. A farm worker who goes 6 hours between meals in physically demanding conditions loses productivity in ways that affect the day's output measurably, and the Amish woman managing the morning kitchen understands this from decades of experience. Meal 5, noon dinner begun. The noon meal, called dinner in Amish households and understood as the largest and most substantial meal of the day, does not begin when the family sits down at 11 or 12. It begins in the early morning hours while the breakfast dishes are still being cleared. A roast that needs 3 hours in the oven must go in before 8. Bread dough that needs to rise before it can be baked must be mixed before the breakfast dishes are washed. Beans that need to simmer for hours must be on the stove before the morning chores are finished. The Amish woman who is managing the morning kitchen is not cooking one meal at a time. She is managing a production sequence, the breakfast finished and clearing, while the noon dinner has already begun its first stage. The packed lunches delivered to the children while the roast is already in the oven, the field snack assembled while the soup pot is already on low heat on the back of the stove. The noon meal that the farmer and his son sit down to at 11:30, meat, potatoes, vegetables, bread, dessert, was begun before they went to the barn at 4:30. By the time it reaches the table, it has been in production for 7 hours. The wood stove skill, 230 words. Everything described in this video is produced on a single cooking surface, a wood stove or propane range that has no digital temperature display, no preset programs, no automatic shutoff, and no way to control heat output with the precision that modern electric and gas ranges provide. The wood stove that an Amish woman cooks on has zones of heat. The area directly over the firebox runs hotter, the back of the stove runs cooler. The warming shelf above holds things at a temperature that keeps them ready without continuing to cook them. Managing 5 simultaneous food productions on this surface requires a specific kind of knowledge that is not learned from a recipe book. It is learned from years of standing at this specific stove, learning how fast it heats on cold mornings, how long it takes to recover after the door is opened, where the hot spots are and where the cooler zones are, and how to sequence items across the surface so that what needs high heat gets it when it needs it, and what needs gentle heat is positioned accordingly. The woman who produces 5 food items before sunrise on a wood stove is not following instructions. She is operating a system she has internalized so completely that the sequencing decisions happen without conscious deliberation. The oatmeal moved to the back before the eggs go in, the bread set to warm while the potatoes finish, the soup pulled forward when the roast goes into the oven. The night before. The 5 morning food productions described in this video do not begin at 4 in the morning. They begin the night before in the deliberate preparation that an experienced Amish cook does every evening to make the following morning's production possible in the available time. Cornmeal mush, the fried cornmeal cake that is a staple of Amish breakfasts, is made the night before and allowed to set in the refrigerator or cool pantry overnight so that it can be sliced and fried quickly in the morning rather than cooked from scratch. Bread is baked on Fridays in most Amish households, producing 6 to 8 loaves that supply the household through the week, so the morning's bread is already made, already sliced, already available without any morning preparation. Beans for the noon soup are soaked overnight, so they will cook in 3 hours rather than 6. Potatoes for the morning's fried potatoes are sometimes par-cooked the evening before, so they only need finishing in the skillet rather than cooking through from raw. The meat for the evening dinner may have been pulled from the cellar the night before to thaw. None of this is a modern meal prep innovation. It is the accumulated practical wisdom of generations of women who managed demanding kitchens without modern appliances and who discovered, through experience, that a good morning begins with a good evening, that the time saved in the morning is always borrowed from the night before. What the children contribute. The Amish morning kitchen does not run on the labor of one person. It runs on the labor of the household, and in a family with 6 or 8 children, the household's labor includes the children's contributions from a very young age. The oldest daughter in an Amish family is typically the mother's primary kitchen assistant, responsible for tasks that the mother assigns based on the child's age and demonstrated competence. A 12-year-old Amish girl may be frying eggs and managing the stove under supervision. A 10-year-old may be packing the school lunches while her mother tends the stove. An 8-year-old may be setting the table, filling the water glasses, and bringing items from the pantry as they are needed. Even a 6-year-old has a morning role stirring the oatmeal, carrying dishes from the kitchen to the table, watching the younger children so the older ones can focus on kitchen tasks. The boys have different morning roles, barn chores, animal feeding, wood carrying, but the girls in the kitchen form a production team whose collective labor makes the 5-meal morning manageable in a way that it would not be if one person were doing all of it alone. The children are not helping in the casual sense of the word. They are performing assigned tasks that the morning's production depends on. If a child fails to complete their assigned role, the gap is visible immediately. The table not set, the lunch is not packed, the stove not tended, and the morning runs behind in ways that affect everything that follows. What happens if the morning falls behind? In the Amish morning kitchen, falling behind has consequences that cascade through the entire day in ways that a modern household with packaged food, a microwave, and a flexible schedule does not experience. If the pre-barn breakfast is not ready when the farmer comes in from the first outdoor check at 4:30, he goes to the barn hungry, which means he works for 2 hours on an empty stomach, which means he comes in for family breakfast more urgent and less patient than usual. If the school lunches are not packed before the children come downstairs, the breakfast table is disrupted by the additional task, and the children may leave late, which matters in a community where the one-room schoolhouse starts at a specific time and where the teacher notices lateness. If the family breakfast is not ready when the farmer returns from the barn at 6 or 6:30, a household of 8 or 10 people stands in the kitchen waiting, which is time lost from the morning that cannot be recovered. If the noon dinner is not started early enough, it is not ready at 11 when the farm workers come in hungry from a morning of heavy physical labor, and the meal that should take 45 minutes to produce is not on the table until 12:30. The Amish morning kitchen has no buffer. Every element of it is timed against the next element, and the margin for delay is narrow. The experienced woman running this kitchen does not fall behind because she learned through the early years of her marriage exactly what falling behind costs, and the cost was sufficient to ensure it does not happen again. The 5 food productions described in this video, the pre-barn breakfast, the packed school lunches, the full family breakfast, the field snack, and the noon dinner already begun, are not a special occasion. They are not the result of a particularly ambitious morning or an unusually productive cook. They are Tuesday. They are also Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and every other morning of the year except Sunday, when the sequence shifts to accommodate the church schedule or the day of rest. The woman who runs this kitchen has been running it since the first weeks of her marriage. She learned the sequence in her mother's kitchen, beginning before she was 10 years old, standing beside the stove and learning by doing what no recipe book could have taught her: the exact behavior of this stove on a cold morning, the exact amount of time the bread needs to warm, the exact window between the farmer leaving for the barn and the children coming downstairs, in which the lunches must be packed. This knowledge is not impressive to her. It is not a performance or a demonstration. It is simply what she does, and what her mother did, and what her grandmother did, and what the daughter, now old enough to stand beside her at the stove, is beginning to learn. The modern world has produced 1,000 kitchen appliances designed to make meal production faster and easier. The Amish kitchen has none of them and produces 5 meals before sunrise anyway, every morning, without complaint, without comment, and without anyone in the household thinking of it as anything other than the ordinary beginning of an ordinary day.